morning, everyone in Germany, or good afternoon, everyone in India. My name is Julian. I'm the project lead of GINSEP, the German Indian Startup Exchange Program. I'm really excited about today's panel that we're having, and we are started right on time, if not even a few seconds early. What we're going to do first, I'll tell a little about the structure of this session before we dive into the contents themselves. What are the topics that we're going to cover? Probably you read also the short write-up of the session, and of course the title also says it itself, that finding the right seed funding for your startup. But of course, we focus on it more from a scientific perspective, from a science-based startup perspective, and of course from the perspective of India and Germany. And for this, we have these great three panelists today with us, that we are going to ask about their experiences and get their insights on these topics. And these topics, first, initially, I would like to shed some light on Germany and India, about the seed investment ecosystem in general. What are the funding programs there, public and maybe also some private ones, that startups and entrepreneurs should reach out to? What are the other support mechanisms there, and how to identify them, of course. So this is the first, I think the most important part as well, that we'll be shedding light on. And then the second one will be more about some startup stories, some examples, but also challenges and opportunities to dive more into the practical side from the startup perspective. And last but not least, definitely we should also tackle the trends and the changes maybe that happened during COVID, and maybe there are some really hot topics or some topics that have become, unfortunately, more cold to focus on. So with that, I would like to start. In case you have any questions, feel free to just post them in the chat. I'll try to keep track on what's going on in the chat. And if it makes sense, I'll ask it, I'll forward that question right away to the panelists. And at the end of the session, we'll also have a short Q&A for 10-15 minutes as well. But we'd like to keep it as interactive as possible and not this one-sided communication. No, but please feel free to add and your comments and your questions there, so we can have your opinions and of course also your questions there as well. With that, I would just like to do a very brief introduction of our panelists here. I'm really excited to have all three of them here. Starting with Dr. Eric Heinze, who's a startup coach at the Institute of Entrepreneurship in Stuttgart, at the University of Stuttgart. And of course, he'll be the expert to shed light on the perspective in Germany. What are the opportunities there for Indian entrepreneurs in Germany, and of course also German entrepreneurs themselves. And the second one, we have Rahul Patel here as well, also from Startup Incubation and Innovation Center from IIT Kanpur, who is of course then shedding light on also the practical side. What are the support mechanisms that are there from the Indian side and in the Indian ecosystem? And really great to have him over here as well from this really renowned institute. And last but definitely not least, Mr. Sagar Singha, also assistant manager from Startup India, to shed light on the government initiatives that are there, and also on this new scheme that Startup India has recently launched. With that, I would like to get started right away. And so the first question I would like to ask, address to Eric. But before I ask you, please, Eric, maybe you would like to introduce yourself also in a few sentences so that everyone gets to know who we are dealing with today.
Julian, so thanks for having me. I hope you guys can hear me well. Today I'm in Belgium, by the way, not in Germany, but it's not so far away. Well, yeah, I myself was a physicist. I was a scientist, maybe like a lot of your panel participants or hearers today. And after my PhD, I started founding a company in the artificial intelligence sector. And with this, I came in the whole startup community. And since then, I'm kind of working at this, let's say, transfer point of science to startup, especially for technology startups. And here at the Institute, under Professor Brenn at the University of Stuttgart, I have the chance to develop new startup coaching programs with a different twist, and of course, some teaching. And of course, we're trying to build up the whole state of Baden-Württemberg, which Stuttgart is in, as like a big, let's say, counterpart to Berlin or Munich, as we have in Germany right now. Yeah, and with this, I'm very curious on what Indian startups have to give. Exactly. So back to you.
Yeah, thanks, Eric. And that means also to the participants here, any question to Eric, please start writing it down. I think later on we'll also share our contact details here in the chat for you. Maybe we'll do that at the end of the session, then to not get distracted at this point. But now, Eric, back to you about the current seed investment ecosystem in Germany. You are the expert on that. So I guess there are some gaps and in Germany as well. So what do the current research findings suggest how these gaps should be addressed? So first of all, what are the gaps and how can we overcome them? What can be done there?
Well, that's putting the finger right in the wound of Germany ecosystem, probably. I think like everywhere where we're trying to follow up where the VC capital or the free capital is not like fully in the market as it would be like in the US or in Israel. I think we have at the very early stage in the idea and the transfer part, we have a lot of programs, maybe even too many programs with standard funding, I would say, where you can work for a year on your idea. And this is like almost a funding zoo, basically. You have so many opportunities that without people on the local and regional level, in our case, it's the state accelerators or the universities, you have no chance to see all the bureaucracy and which program is fitting to you because it's related to what topic you're in or if you're like in cooperation with the company. If you go on the higher stage, the seed level, it gets less. So basically after the pre-seed stage, the seed stage has some gaps. Here we have a lot of funding in Berlin. I think we have almost 4 billion euros funding VC capital in Berlin. But this is only there. So the rest is like really low, like more like not even 10% of this is in the rest of the regions, not altogether. But overall, you have to see, I think in Germany, the VC capital is, I think, something like 8 billion or something, so half of which goes to Berlin. So it's a lot of concentration at the moment. But there's things happening. We have a lot of VC firms and business angels going for bigger tickets in the seed rounds. What they want to see is traction. I think it's a more conservative investment market here in Germany. And this is not changing because this is cultural. So research suggests, because you cannot get a VC culture in like you have in the US or in Israel, that the state could act as a first partner. Basically, like going into seed stage, saying, okay, we allocate some of the government ministries' budgets to work with innovative startup companies in the seed stage. So more as a direct partner, not a pure financing, but giving them innovation project, let them participate on bigger technology challenges as the DoD in the US or in Israel does. So basically, instead of having a seed funding scheme, as it would be in the Silicon Valley, we're thinking more about partnerships, really tractable work with the teams as like a, well, basically, so for the teams that have some readiness or product readiness that can work with these state challenges. So this is where research suggests, and I think this fits more to our cultural background here. I'm not sure if we ever going to be at this stage where we have this free capital as you see it, seed capital as you have in the US market. We have a lot of US market investors. They always tell me that it's very cheap in Germany to invest. I would pay 10 times the amount of money to get a technology startup in the US. So this is also a difference where we have to act, and probably something that India has also a problem with.
Very interesting, Eric. I was just wondering and a little surprised about what you're saying because as you might know, or we at GINSEP, we support Indian startups looking at Germany, German startups looking at India. And one of the key things that I'm always telling the startups, look beyond the capital. right? And that applies to India and to Germany, because it's not like in France or in the UK, where you have one region where you have Paris or London, and that is basically where everything is happening. No, in Germany it's decentralized, so you better look beyond the capital, because there's so many opportunities for you there. But now you're saying, when it comes to funds or raising funds, basically, should one stick to the capital?
No, I mean the thing I would say, like capital investment is like I'm saying like the easiest comparison is like probably like trucks. Once you have one investment scheme, you know, the next shot needs to be bigger, bigger, and bigger until the exit. Okay, so investment should always have a goal. It's like a tool. It's not that investment itself is what you want to aim at as a startup. You want to aim at traction. You want to aim at customers. You want to work with them. So in order to get the big B2B customers that, you know, one big project can, you know, boost you a long way, and helps you to build up reputation, I would always go for bigger projects and proper innovative works than just VC financing. So finance you can get once you have your system running and you have a really straight way forward to go. But then I have to ask, isn't then the banking loan the easier way without giving like away with basically parts of a company? So here you have to see, it's like about, I'm not sure, I have a topic that many of the B2B startups I'm coaching do not want to have this hyper growth basically system. They don't want to get in this fully hyper growth investment. So they're looking for more corporate investments, smart investments, they, you know, let's say long-term investments, not these 2 to 3 years investments.
Okay, that is super interesting, and we're getting right into some details here already. So now I would like to know something about the Indian side, and then later on compare it, if you agree or disagree, and we see really what the differences or also the commonalities are. I'll direct the first question to Raul. Maybe before I ask you about this, would you also like to introduce yourself in one two sentences?
Sure. Thanks, Julian. So, uh, I am an engineer basically from by educational background. I did my BTech in chemical engineering. Then for last 7, 8 years, I have been part of different startup ecosystems in India. I have worked with food tech startup as an operation head. I have worked with a hospitality startup as the head of strategic initiatives as well. Then I formed my own company, which was running for rural tech job integration vertical. Then I've been part of the healthcare ecosystem as well. And here in the incubation center, I had a strategic initiative, which essentially is where our ecosystem in the incubation center of IIT Kanpur is probably one of the oldest incubation centers. So we have now reached to a stage where we can say we are mature. We are a mature ecosystem in terms of the quality of process, programs, and understanding. So now we are looking for the next phase of growth for the startups and for the companies that we have built over the period of last 2 decades. So that's briefly the introduction about me and what I do here in SISC.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. What I find really great is that you are not just someone who, is talking about, helping the startup, but you know exactly from, firsthand, building different startups yourself, like what startups need and what the challenges are and how to overcome them. So I'll ask you straight away, for raising capital, who did you turn to when you were looking for capital in your different startups?
Right. Um, so I would say the kind of a startup, the word you can define in two separate ways. One kind of startups are where we are doing the business process innovation, which is essentially box it or food tech startups or hospitality startups like Oyo. They're getting any support from state government funding agencies or that kind of funding is very difficult. But on the other hand, if you are building a deep tech solution, if it is very IP-driven solution, if it's a core innovation engineering in biotechnology, healthcare, agriculture, there the state fundings are in plenty. So depending upon, so when I was building the first phase of my startups, when I was working on rural tech job integrations, or now when I'm working on healthcare, the first round of investments or the capital have come from the state agencies. While when we were working on Box 8, which is food tech, or Oyo, which is hospitality tech, we turn to VCs and angel investors. So, and the whole government ecosystem for the funding to these tech startups in India now is quite mature, I would say. I mean, we have at least 10 different state funding agencies. So, different agencies fund different kind of startups. And in the Indian context, if you are trying to raise anywhere between couple of lakhs to 50, 60 lakh Indian rupees, government funding is plenty available if you are working on a IP driven or core innovation driven module.
Okay, super interesting. And would you agree with that what Eric said about Germany, that it is similar in India, or what do you think is the difference there?
So, I mean, I certainly don't know about the German culture that way. So I can't really comment that whether the ecosystem is not growing from that perspective. But
What we're
in
trying to
India,
find
I
out
would,
today.
yeah. So as far as India is concerned, I would say we have two different kind of ecosystems. One ecosystem which we often, hear in the news or in the funding schemes, that n number of unicorns are coming in India. Just one fact is that this year we have had 10 unicorns, which is that more than the total sum of last 10 years. So in that way, the ecosystem in Bangalore, Delhi, and Mumbai, which is the tier one cities of India, is quite similar to what we are seeing in US or Israel market or Singapore market. But when it comes to the core IP or core tech driven or engineering solution driven markets, I suggest it is similar to what Eric was saying about Germany as well. That the state funding agencies are the primary source of capital investments at the early stages of the development.
Wonderful. State funding agencies is the keyword for me over here. So let's move on to Saga Singer before I ask you about your funding schemes. Saga, would you like to introduce yourself briefly?
Sure, Yulin. And first of all, thanks for having me here. It's really a pleasure. And to tell something about myself, to start with, just like Rahul, I am also a mechanical engineer by education. I did my BTech degree from IIT Kharagpur, where I was involved in several core projects related to mechanical engineering. And right out of college, I joined Invest India, under which the Startup India initiative is housed. Here at Invest India, or you can call it Startup India, I have been working on different departments, primary ones being procurement division, which looks into how more innovative ways can be brought upon to engage with startups, basically G2B connect, B2G connects. And have also worked with different states to build up their startup policies, such as Jammu and Kashmir and Jharkhand, and how they can operationalize it. So that is a little bit about myself.
Wonderful. So about what we tackled first, I think we don't have to say much about Invest India and Startup India as an initiative of Invest India. In fact, with GINSEP, we are also working with Startup India and Invest India on different levels for the last few years. And now there is something, well, you offered some different support systems or different support for startups as well. Maybe we can talk about this a little later. But recently you've launched a new initiative, right? The Startup India Seed Fund Scheme, if I'm correct. SISFS. What does that entail? What is that about?
Yeah, so it really has been a buzzword, at least for the last 6 months since its announcement. As the name very much suggests, it's the seed fund to support startups in their early stages. It was launched around earlier this year, and it is one of the fastest scheme to reach the launching to operationalization stage in just 3 months. The portal was launched back in April. So before I get into details of the exact scheme. The fact I would like to tell some facts about the ecosystem that we have here in India. So there are approximately 7,500 startups coming up each year in the country. And while Startup India or other departments as well are there to support them throughout their life cycle, the start part is really important because that is where they struggle with a lot of things, especially funding. To raise their first amount of funding to build the prototype, to get into the market, a completely new market. So that area, government has not come forward to touch upon that and help that. So this Startup India Seed Fund scheme will be there for startups who are quite young, just 2 years after incorporation, are still looking to get into the market, are trying to build their prototype and commercialize their products. So for them, this 945 crore corpus funds has been launched, and this will flow through incubators. So the incubators will be there to support them as well. Once the funds have flown from government to the incubators. So that is a little bit about it. The reason that this was launched, even though startup funding in India has been doing good at least for this year, and there are other scheme as well, because this particular start stage, early stage, when the startups are trying to just launch their product, that was a place where they would always find difficult to raise funds, especially from VCs or angel investors, when they hadn't yet proved their point that they have a good product. So that is what we are trying to cater. And a lot of work has been done in just the last 6 months. We have now around 18 incubators through which these funds will be flowing through these startups, and we hope to support around 3,600 startups through this scheme. So all in all, the prime motive here is to get the ball rolling for startups so that once they have grown to the sufficient point, they can take it on from there.
Really interesting. Thanks for that. I'll try to incorporate the question from Sahaj Sandhu here. I think it referred to what Rahul was saying about IIT Kanpur. As contrary to what the current host is talking about at IIT Kanpur incubation, standalone incubation labs are not surviving even first few years. How shall we compete with them? So, he's talking about private and bootstrapped ones. So you also, Saga, you also mentioned you set up these incubation centers. Can you comment on that? What is your opinion on that? Before I'll ask Rahul to who was actually addressed with that question.
Yeah. So I think I would like to first of all a bit of clarity here. The incubators that are selected here are incubators who are quite established, have been doing a lot of work, have successfully graduated more than 25, 30 startups. So the startups, if you want to apply, it's not necessary that you have to be under these incubators. You can very much go to them. So the incubator here is just as a point for conducting a committee evaluation for your startup. So that is the responsibility given to incubators. So very much any startups can go and apply. Of course, you fulfill small criteria such as you should be not more than 2 years in age and all. And as far as bootstrap startups are concerned, there are many bootstrap startups that are not only unicorn but decacorn now. There are some names such as Zoho and Zerodha that are doing great. So as I would just like to tell again that yes, maybe for past few years, maybe 10 years back, 5 years back, it was quite difficult to have a bootstrap startup. But now, as Rahul also says, that there are various schemes and fundings or grants to support you in this early stage so that you can get yourself going.
Okay. Rahul, maybe any clarification or comment from your side on this? Before I want to ask Eric about what he thinks about that point in Germany. But first to you, Rahul.
Sure. So what I believe is when Sahaj is saying that a lot of bootstrapped innovation lab or incubation labs are coming up, particularly in last 3-4 years, since the incubation has become a very well known name in the ecosystem of India. It took us 21 years to be at the stage where we are. IIT Kanpur's incubator is one of the largest incubator in the country. So it took a lot of time, and we only expanded in last 4 or 5 years. For the last 15, 20 years, we were, for 15 years, we were running very few schemes, running and supporting very small number of startups. And a lot of support came from IIT Kanpur, which is our parent institution, and also from the state funding agencies. Without the support from state funding agencies or any major corporate or any major CSR, based on my understanding, it would be very difficult to run a bootstrapped incubation or innovation lab, because the kind of cost involved for running such operations, such large scale portfolio management is substantial. So, but so far I've seen a lot of government agencies have been, providing different kind of funds, different kind of schemes for supporting such innovation labs. So, in fact, we at the moment are running the incubation and entrepreneurship related labs with 20 different engineering institutions in the state of Uttar Pradesh. which is chaired by IIT Kanpur. So such schemes are there, and you can certainly reach out to any of such schemes to get the support.
Okay, great for that insight there. I didn't know that. Eric, on that point, how is it in Germany?
Of course, we have state-financed incubators, and we have private acceleration programs, incubators, and usually I think it's very difficult. You have one point, you have many incubators that do not survive. In my opinion, have a very they're like focusing too broad. The same, we want to have the startup from very early stage talents all the way to the Series A super story. And this does not work because this acceleration and incubation programs, in my opinion, only work. They have one function for me, not just to call the business, but to create a higher density of talents. So if you have a distributed landscape, and then you have one point in the region, you're trying to get the best talent together so they can learn by each other. So learning from teaching and learning with the best. And if you cannot succeed in creating this value for a region where you basically concentrate this talent, then you will fail in your value proposition towards the ecosystem. And therefore your incubation lab, private or state funded, will not work. And for us, it was very important. We started 2-3 years ago with a Gründermotor, which is like a state program, trying to say, okay, we have so many great teams and so many stuff, but we need something to concentrate to make it more visible. And this is always working at this edge corner between corporates that pay for the show, basically in the private company, and then you have the talents from the universities. And these are two different cultures, and it needs an intermediate that basically coaches both sides. And what's very important is that if you want to have as an incubation, if you start to focusing too early on the companies, then you basically become a venture client model, and it doesn't work. You're not getting the best teams anymore because you're only working for the companies as like an extended innovation research platform. And if you're focusing too much on the startups, what they need, so they have a fun time, you're neglecting the part of the corporates that actually, have different values. They want to have innovation branding. They want to have some stuff for their value chain. So the challenge is, as an incubation model, is to do a very proper matchmaking. That means the corporates have certain value chains that, I'm sorry, not every startup fits to that value chain. And they want to have their innovation part done. So what we did, or what we think, what's going to work, so in order to extend this, we build like a typical data crawling, AI identification theme for startups. So basically crawl every startup hub that's somewhere in the state. Get the teams together, evaluate them, what they do, and then match them to the corporate partners, which we ask them, hey, what teams you actually need at the moment, what innovation challenges you have, not challenges, but what topics you're having, and then trying to matchmaking them, sending them portfolios of teams that we have found, and then they tell us, oh, these teams are interesting. And then you would say it should be very easy for the corporates to contact them, basically writing email, but it's not the case. They're not the culture, they're not speaking the language. So if we as a translator, as our incubator, the Gründermotor, goes towards the startups, building up trust, finding out if it's fitting, if it's a match, and then we bring them together to create a program in which all the people getting value out of. And this is a lot of work before your program starts. So if you don't do this properly, basically expectation management, the incubation program will fail after 2 years. So at the moment, we're having a plus side on many startups telling us coming in, and we have many corporates signing up. So I think we're on a good level. But if you want your incubation program to sustain, focus and do a proper matchmaking between the expectations of your corporate partners and the startups.
Super interesting. Thanks, Eric, for this. I think we got a little carried away by this interesting topic now as well, but based on the question that came in, but I wanted to explore it because I think it's extremely relevant. But now, basically focusing on the funding schemes and maybe public funding schemes here in general. I'll stick with you, Eric. How to identify the right funding scheme for your startups. Let's talk about the public ones, but if you have a good suggestion of for private ones, then please share it as well. But how it's a really hands-on question for startups and entrepreneurs out there. How do I really identify the right one?
So you have many programs. If you Google this, the your search list will explode. So basically, in Europe, you have EU level funding programs, you have government, basically Germany level funding programs, and you have state. So you have 16 states in Germany. You have state funding programs. What I tell younger teams is that the EU level programs is so much bureaucracy for too little money. So don't apply for a EU scheme, if you unless you want to get 1 million from this program, because the overhead will basically eat everything up. The state schemes, the very local ones, the regional ones, are hard to get in. But I give you an opinion, except that you have like intermediates, like in our case, the state accelerator program in Baden-Württemberg. We have 12, 13 state accelerators that have topic related, like say food tech or med tech or green tech and so on, which even Indian startups can go to, and they help you to find the right partner programs on the regional and state level. So these intermediates, I would always recommend to contact them first. If you want, you can contact me, and I can forward you to the right persons there. Because without them, I would say even in Baden-Württemberg alone, which is one state of Germany, we have over 30 funding programs in all different kind of colors. And then comes the state programs to it, which in our case, the most popular one is Exist, which helps like university startups to get like a 100 grand or even more for 1 year, paying for 3 persons to get the idea into like a business readiness. The most famous in Germany and has the biggest output because it's the more spread. But I'm not sure if it's so easy for Indian startup teams to get in. So maybe if you're enrolled at university, then it's fine. The best way, as I said, is going to the state programs. So one little tip would also be to look at the ministries of Germany, like the Ministry of Health or Ministry of FinTech. They always pull out challenges, certain amounts. They have their own funding schemes, so it's worth to Google them, the different ministries, depending on what topic you're in, and then finding the schemes from there. Or contact me and I transfer you to the Baden-Württemberg contacts.
Yeah, in fact, I was also asking for your contact here in the chat. We'll share the contacts at the end of the session. Eric, what you said also goes very much in line also with what we do, what we're trying to do at GINSEP, where we try to bring together as an open platform, bring together all the opportunities that are there in both India and Germany for startups. So that can be very sector-wise, that can be so any challenges. Let's say we have a network of more than 150 different organizations in Germany and India. So what we do on our social media channels and website, we promote individual opportunities for startups to apply to. So and many of them are also challenges where you can also get grants. And I think usually working with Indian startups that are looking at Germany or German startups looking at India, this entry point is really a difficult or crucial challenge here. But that is a different story altogether. Let's stick to these funding schemes. Maybe to Saga also talking about this. You mentioned the Startup India seed funding scheme, but now also for foreign founders, but also Indian founders. How would they identify the right funding scheme in India? How should they approach it?
Okay, so I think the narrative quite says the same for all the startups across the globe, I would say, because there are few good practices you can say that have to be followed anywhere, apart from the differing compliances and regulation across the borders, of course. So finding the right investors or finding the right schemes, you should first know what exactly do you want. There are startups who don't need a lot of money to start with. There are other capital intensive startups. So you have to decide first that what is the right type of funding you would require. Are you ready to give away your equity? Are you fine with getting some debt? Are you okay with taking some grant money, which generally has smaller amount of money involved than VC funds? So you have to really look into that. When foreign startups are concerned, when coming to India, Indian startups going abroad, I would say that it's important to understand exactly why you are going in different territory. Because what is the extra factor that you're looking at that you're not getting in your own territory? be it for either Indian startups or foreign startups. And then you have to be on the page with the investor or the scheme, the whoever manages the scheme, that what are their intentions, what exactly do they want out of a startups. For example, many investors are not looking to go outside a particular country, so they prefer to invest in startups who are going to be there in that territory. So you have to keep that in mind rather than putting a lot of time in that direction and not getting anything in results. So these are some things. Apart from that, of course, you have to start, of course, 6 months or 7 months or 8 months back when you actually require funding. You have to figure out the details as to what exactly you're going to spend your money on. And again, funding is not exactly a milestone or a success parameter. What you do with that money is then defines the milestones and success parameters. So that is a kind of, I would say, misconception many startups have, that if they raise a particular amount of money, that is a kind of success for them. But that is not so, in my opinion. And of course, the other things are very small, very peculiar, but important to follow, such that, for example, few VCs or few angel investors on their website have very particular format that they need your pitch deck in. So just go with that format. Many people keep it an open-ended. So how do you utilize that 5 minutes, 4 minutes, 1 minute pitch, whatever you're getting? So these are few things that you have to keep in mind. The best thing is to start as early as possible and know why do you exactly need money, what do you want to do with it.
Okay, great. Thanks. And do you have, Saga, do you have one recommendation for startups, for foreign and Indian startups, where they should go to really identify the right schemes? Is it through your website, or how do I find out which scheme is the right one for me?
Yeah, so Yulian have already answered it. So yes, it is the website. The Startup India website lists a lot of scheme, sector agnostic scheme, sector specific scheme. That is there right on the website, just one click away. I would also urge the startup to look into the Startup India seed fund scheme, because it's just coming up right now, and many startups are looking to it, especially the younger startups. So these two places, I think that is enough for guidance to start with, because there are a lot of schemes listed on the website itself, as well as investors if you directly want to connect with private investors, not just the government schemes as well.
Wonderful, wonderful. Rahul, with regard to SIC, so you support startups as well when raising seed capital, or does it only apply to Indian startups or also foreign startups? And what is your take on that?
Sure. So at this moment, so mandate with SIC is essentially to support the Indian startups, because to be incubated, you have to have 51% owner of the company to reside with the Indian founders. But we have a couple of companies which are sort of collaboration between a foreign. I think one company is from Switzerland, and there is another company from Singapore, which are forming the joint collaboration with an Indian startup, and then that collaborated startup is incubated in our incubation center, where 51% of the equity resides with the Indian residents. That's the mandate that we follow at the moment, because so far we were not expanding much. This may change after a year or two, where we also start taking the foreigner startups from any country, depending upon how the program comes up. But apart from that, for the Indian companies, we at the moment we run close to 25 different funding schemes, which range from a couple of thousand rupees fellowship per year up to a year, to 1 crore rupees in the grant and equity supports as well. And beyond that, since we are one of the largest incubation center at the moment, we have 104 startups in the incubation currently as of now when we speak. And we get close to 70-80 applications every month, out of which we select only 4 to 5 startups to be incubated here. So the selection criteria itself, removes a lot of startups that don't fit in the criteria. So what we do not engage these startups based on these schemes, but when they get incubated here, we have a large portfolio team. So the portfolio manager assigned to the startup, based on the interaction with the startup, their stage of development, their domain of the development, then they sort of recommend which funding schemes or which government agency you should reach out to. And apart from that, since we have also graduated close to 50 startups, so we have a big kind of portfolio where we engage with these startups very frequently. And these startups have raised capitals when they went outside of the incubation or when they, moved to the next phase of growth. So there is a lot of I would say a lot of angel groups and investor groups that we frequently interact with. So our portfolio teams, one of the core assignment or the KRA is to interact with different investors and engage the particular startups or particular domains with these VCs and the angel groups. And we also keep interacting with individual angels as well, because IIT Kanpur, since it's a big alumni group, so we have people all over the places in different CEO profiles, different CXO profiles in India and abroad as well. So we keep sending out the names of a couple of startups to the entire the alumni network, and based on the interest area or based on the interest domains, different alumni keep coming up and fund to support the funding of certain startups. So all of this is part of the whole incubation ecosystem. So like I said, it's an ecosystem where we have multiple parties involved for different fundings for different kind of startups. So it's depending upon what the startup needs, we try to sort of match make that part with the startup.
Wonderful. And you mentioned the also some foreign startups. I totally understand that this is not the main focus, but since we're talking on an international session here, connecting Germany and India and comparing the ecosystems and talking about both the perspectives. And this is also the domain where I'm active in with GINSEP. And this is what we've learned. One of the main learnings, if I may add that for any startups, and particularly when it's earlier, how do you access the other market? Well, you need to identify some relevant the relevant stakeholders there and connect to them to really make use of the network that the other organization over there has. So if I have I think I have a great product for India, just incorporating and doing business and setting up my business not going to help, because I'm of course lacking the understanding and need to understand what are the competitors or the potential other startups that I could work with, and of course an incubator that is specialized in a certain sector and has this big network is the go-to place for that startups. And this is what I always recommend for the foreign startups, and the same applies to Germany, that they should do that and reach out and try to get connected to these kind of relevant players for them. So this is why we at GINSEP also try to work and bring together all these ecosystem partners to make sure that startups also can get access to them. So that was just a little excursion there on that side. Now we have
on this. I'll just add another pointer, Julian. So this is exactly what. What we are trying to do with different startups. So a lot of startups in our portfolio have, where the major market could be outside India. And for such kind of startups, coming from Germany or some other country, reaching out to the incubator or the existing startup that have been there for last year or two, where they have kind of similarities, would be the perfect way to engage into a new market.
Yeah, absolutely. I could agree more. Wonderful. So now we have a good 15 minutes left. Please, for questions, if you have, post them in the chat. And I would like to talk a little about some practical stories here, startup stories, maybe some examples and challenges that they were facing, in particular also in the light of COVID. Maybe we start with some stories that we also have. Eric, to you, particularly tech startups, that is, I think, majorly your field of expertise or your major interest or focus area. What kind of tech startups are there in Germany that currently attract the most seed capital? Is there some examples that you can give? Are they related to COVID? Is there some correlation there, or what is the scene out there at this point?
Well, I'm not sure about seeds. I mean, of course, we know CureVac and BioNTech. At some point they were probably at the seed stage. They get, they're in the news. And CureVac was one of these startups that started with one of these state funding schemes. somewhere back in the 2000, beginning of 2000s. So they have been running through this whole, perfect line story, which is, I would say, a rare case. I would say the biggest investments go into the area of course, data analytics schemes. Before it was more data management, and now it becomes more and more, and it was sensors and getting data, then was data management, now goes into the analytics parts, because it takes a while for the economy, to implement the new solutions coming from the startup schemes. So if you see the latest unicorn with Celonis, for example, which do pretty much some predictive data analytics, then you see this. What the next big thing is going to be, probably most investors looking for artificial intelligence of things. Basically, it's the AIoT startups that are working more on these roles, because this fits to the German market. And therefore, here, a lot of seed investments go into this direction. And many people are liking these integrations startup schemes. Of course, we see the quantum startups, quantum cryptography, quantum sensoric, quantum communications, because we're strong here in research. There's strong research hubs going on here. And of course, we have some space tech startups, for example, ESA Aerospace in Munich, and we have High Impulse in Stuttgart, which attract some money, but it's more trendy topics. So if you're like really closer to the market, it's, in my opinion, more AIoT at the moment, if I would focus it. This is but what tech startups is. Of course, there's always, when there's a good market and you have good access and you have a scalable solution, you will attract seed money. And I think this, from a tech perspective, these are the topics to come at the moment in our cases here.
Okay, interesting. Maybe Oya, I saw that in the chat. Please, the questions, send them to everyone else. I won't be able to see it, and then I can't take it up. So if you send it to a particular a panelist, then please resend it to under tag to everyone. Thanks for that. Now to Saga. So maybe some stories, or also what has changed now over the last 1 year, 1.5 years, with of course in that pandemic, but also with regard to the funding. So what do you think has changed in terms of trends and issues? Maybe you also have 1 or 2 examples there that really reflect the change of the landscape here.
Sure. So last year, of course, what was quite difficult for, I would say, any business, especially for startups. But looking at this year, the amount of funding has been highest than ever in the last 6 years. In fact, just to quote one data, in the last 6 months, the first 6 months of this year, what amount of funding was accumulated was higher than the entire amount of funding accumulated the last year. So the startups that have pivoted, that have changed their business strategy, have come out strong. These startups have earned the trust of the investors and the market as well, that they're unique and flexible. So yes, the last years were very difficult for these startups, but this year has a lot of promises, and they are reaping the benefits out of that. I can of course go into many numbers, but just to highlight a few, that as Rahul was saying, that many unicorns are coming up. I think this year more than 20 unicorns have alone come up, which has never been the case. I think we have now 60 plus unicorns in the country now. Moreover, Bangalore was discussed. Bangalore was actually regarded as the fastest growing tech hub in the entire world in a London-based report this year itself. So all of this actually reflects that the startups of the country have stood up to the situation, who were in, let's say, brick and mortar store, went directly digital, pivoted their businesses, such as Zomato did a little bit of tweaking, Swiggy started delivering other packages apart from food delivery as well. So these are some of the things. If I have to quote one particular example, I would actually pick My Labs, who developed the first homegrown COVID testing kit of the country way back in the start of the COVID pandemic in the country. So you can see that the startups were at the forefront of the pandemic, rescuing people in different stages and different fronts. So yes, the pandemic has been a bit difficult, but a lot of learnings have came out of them as well.
Okay, wonderful. I see now some questions are pouring in, and sorry, there was a confusion about the chat and sending to everyone. Basically, you have to send it to all panelists. I'm sorry that option was not available here for me. So, but I think now you figured it out. Saga, there are some requests for you. Some people are asking for some links and point of contacts. Would be great. Maybe you can put it in the chat directly.
Definitely.
But Sonia is asking, what are trends for startups outside the tech or medical field? Let's just take this up for Germany and India. Now, Saga, that way with you, maybe a brief comment on this from your side, and then I'll ask Raul, and then I'll ask Eric as well.
So first, before answering that, see, last 1 year has taught us that most of the sectors need to have some amount of tech involved to stay relevant to the business, to the market now. But if you still remove all of this, there are still sectors who are doing great without tech or medical field. I would actually pick up biotechnology, which is known to be taking a lot of time in R&D before it can actually make a product. So these are sectors which have a lot of time-taking activities, but investors have also started to focus on that. So of course, the trend has been much better for, let's say, tech or hospitality sector after the pandemic. But of course, other sectors also earned focus because startup ecosystem in general as well has earned a lot of focus in the last 5 years.
Okay, great. Rahul, your take on this. The trends for startups, maybe also in because we didn't hear your opinion on the COVID trends. But yeah, so in general, the trends on this over the last 1.5 years, but then also in and outside of tech and medical field.
Right. So in terms of COVID, I would say, I mean, I may be blamed for saying this, but COVID for the startups in our incubation center has been a big boon. And one of the reasons has been because the very early stages of the first wave, we realized that with COVID, there is going to be a number of challenges with India, particularly in terms of not having the PPE kits, not having the masks, not having ventilators, not having devices, not having oxygen supply sufficiently, and we set out these problem statements to most of our startups, and they stood up to the challenge. So one of these startups which completely pivoted from their solar panel cleaning robots to making the indigenized ICU ventilators, and we were able to get the complete ventilator done within 90 days, and 90 days from an idea to a completely installed ventilator in a hospital. And this entire year, they have sold more than 3,000 units of the ventilators, and their revenue increment has been close to 100x if you compare to the previous financial year and this year. Similarly, during the second wave, when the oxygen problem was there in the country, a couple of startups stood up to develop concentrators and oxygen plants. And one of the startups that has developed the oxygen plant, earlier they used to make the floating water jetties. And it was again a pivot, short duration of time within 90 days from the idea to a completely installed oxygen plant in a hospital premise. And their revenue of this quarter only has been 10x than their entire financial year's revenue of last year. There are at least 7 to 8 such stories in our incubation center where the startups understood the problem statements. We helped them to develop the new product in a new line, and they came up with the perfect solution. And any such a startup that has been able to do that, they have had a good field day in the duration of the pandemic because it was something which was critically needed during the entire year, and they were, I mean, they were providing exactly what was needed. Uh, in terms of general trends, I would say the trend for healthcare and biotechnology is going to continue in a probably in a better accelerated way in terms of the kind of startup that are coming up, the quality of these startups, and also in terms of the number of funding that is coming to these startups. Uh, but nevertheless, I mean, apart from it, the generic trends in terms of the areas which are growing, energy is going to be certainly one area which will have a lot of growth from the perspective of energy storage to the perspective of energy generation, both. Apart from that, particularly in terms of India, probably water management and water resources monitoring is going to be another key area which will see a lot of growth because of the current government's strong focus on delivery of the water to each home via piped water supply. So such areas which are very very niche, but will see a lot of growth because of the what's happening around it.
Okay, great. Thanks for that. Eric, after having heard Rahul's and Sagar's view on that, and any comment on this, on other trends, maybe outside the medical and tech field as well in Germany over the last 1.5 years?
Yeah, I can definitely, what Rahul said, with the water management topic, this is definitely coming up here too. I mean, you would think Germany is a water-rich country, but in the case, we're also seeing the problems that water comes too much on one point and not enough on the other. And the whole field of agriculture tech and water management tech is coming up. I see more teams with innovative solutions that need to be integrated in a more conservative market. And we see big companies are getting interested away from this energy. We had this high energy technology focus, which is still there and still needs a lot, but it goes over the broader utility scheme, so people trying to become like more, the infrastructure 2.0, if you say it this way, gets revolutionized in a way. So I see a lot of trends here, like be it road work, be it water management, but we also have forest management and agriculture technology that comes bigger and bigger into action play. So here I think you can go with easy solutions, not as technology high driven, but just with new business models, and you can roll up markets here very well. Another field is, of course, property and construction tech, which we see because there are a lot of shortages there. Property technologies, it's like also was a if you look at current consultancy markets that have like basically intermediates, and these are usually good markets. And property tech, I see many startups rolling up, and also in the financial department, you see with the current crisis of Corona, many state funds, have very low, give you very low, basically, zinsen on your interest on your savings. And so a lot more people looking for investments themselves, like the huge majority of people looking now in more risk-laden investments, but there's a big urge for them to have like green investments. So, and you have the current discussion there that's very tough for fund managers to get like the green investment scheme or sustainable investments. And I see a lot of startups going to the sector, providing directly how can I invest in green and sustainable projects. And this I see growing interest. I'm not saying it's a big trend, but I see that fits together. A couple of things come together. So agriculture, water management, I think it's going to be one of the next big things here. And I'm very looking, and I see offshore, absolutely outshore wind energy, but this is like a big topic. So here like big companies on there. But if you want to go and say one field that's a little bit new is like the airborne wind energy, like this kites topics. Maybe there's something for bigger technology company, little teams. There's something there. Yeah.
Okay, great. Thanks, Eric. I see there's another question from Ketki about whether two incubators can work together. Maybe one of the panelists want to take this up individually, maybe Rahul or Saga, also Eric, of course, anyone, maybe individually, because looking at the time, we have officially 2 minutes left, but I think we're extending a very little because it's so interesting. I would have like rounding off a little topic. We talked about some trends now, but now the most common challenges of the or for startups to identify the scheming funds. So with regard to this, what are, and this is to all three of you, with regard to the most common challenges of them, what are these challenges, and then how to overcome them? What is your recommendation there? Who wants to start? I see Rahul is typing right now, so maybe Saga, you want to start then?
Sure. So just my 2 cents here. I think there are lot of cities and lot of states still in India are still to be completely aware about the startup journey and the amount of potential that it holds. Surely in the last 1 year it has been starting to develop, but I think the awareness about schemes or initiatives or any other things that is what is needed to be penetrated. across the cities, across the people, and more number of people need to see it as a very good option rather than conventional jobs. So I think awareness is one thing that I'm really hoping that will improve over time and hence will improve the culture in the country as well.
Okay, thanks. Rahul, maybe to you. The most common challenges and how to overcome them when it comes to finding suitable investors.
Yeah, I think one of the key things which I have seen is lack of understanding that people try to not build and go with the gut feeling very often. The best, I mean, there is so much out there in the internet which you can learn and develop your theories around. And one of the common mistakes which people very frequently do, which I also did when we were raising the first round or when we were trying to raise the first round, was just get the list of investors and start spamming your introduction decks and introduction pages, which never works, never ever. The best method would be to learn a lot, learn a bit about the particular investor or the VC firm that you are reaching out. Write to them personalized with personalized understanding. Why do you want to raise it from them, and why should they invest in you? And another key thing, since we are the technology incubator or technology business incubator, which we very frequently or very often see, is that people who come to us would be very good with tech. They would be very well versed with their own domain, the whole technology understanding of the domain, the engineering understanding, but they will lack the business understanding. And it's very difficult for them probably to appreciate. So it takes a lot of energy from our side to help them to understand that it's not only the tech innovation that is going to make the business. It requires the business understanding and the tech innovation both. And only understanding tech innovation is half the battle won, not the entire battle.
Great, thanks.
Well, I can feel you here. A lot of tech startups, you would say, hey, what I always tell them is like, okay, start loving your numbers. So you would think that tech startups should be good with numbers, but starting in an Excel sheet with making your calculations just once, just for yourself. It seems to be a huge difficulty, especially for engineers. They say, okay, but if I don't know the number exactly, what is the point of making this number up? And say, you're not making it up, you're making the best guess to your knowledge now and creating questions from there, which help you to understand your business. And I guess, in my opinion, I would say, you don't have to do pitching, you don't have to show your vision. If you start with your numbers, then everything falls out of there. If you have a great business case and your numbers show this for you, it's not, stop convincing investors, start convincing you, start convincing yourself, this is a great business I want to build a family on, in the future. This is something I want to do. And then you're getting the confidence from the numbers. And trust me, with this confidence, you will convert every investor as your friend. Because they love this confidence. They love people that understand their business. They're going all the way through. And sorry, just the PowerPoint doesn't do it, but your numbers do. And from the numbers, you will ask the questions and you put all your learnings into numbers. There's not one learning which you cannot do into a number. And so the big challenge is that people hate doing numbers, I would say, and you have to start loving them. It was for me myself. When I started the startup, I didn't really have, I was loving my technology, but not my numbers. Numbers was this thing I didn't want to do. It's not so interesting. And I would say the big change for me was once, I had a family and, numbers became very important suddenly. So please trust me, start earlier, learning, loving your numbers. And then you have to also plan the market extension for
it. Great. I actually wanted to ask every single one of you about some final words. And now, Eric, this sounded already like a really clear recommendation. But now, maybe before we round off, it's 3 minutes past already. I would like to ask everyone for some a final sentence, a final recommendation, and maybe also share your contact details here. I'm also sharing mine now. So from my side, from Ginsep, please feel free to follow us or visit our website, follow us on LinkedIn, and or connect to me individually or send an email to me directly. I'll just post the details over here. And With that, maybe one last sentence from each and every single one, final recommendation, or also what you want to say to the audience. Who wants to start? Any volunteer? Okay, then I'll pick one.
Well, I can start.
Eric, you were starting.
Loving your numbers, it's also there's nothing wrong in thinking big, but it's very difficult to get thinking big and starting small together. But it does work. It does work. It just needs proper planning and commitment. And I would say, as every incubation, step, we can help you with finding the right business model. We can help you with everything, but the full commitment needs to come from you. We're not there. I'm sorry, I'm trying to speak here for the Indians. So we cannot motivate you. This is something you have to do yourself. Okay, we can give you the tools and the network, but the motivation, commitment, the burning for your business does have to come from you. But if you have this is a very good fundamental base for success, I would say. They're willing to learn, be able to learn fast and a lot, and going there full in. This is the best combination, I would say.
Cool. Thank you, Eric. Rahul, your final words.
Yeah, from my side, I would just suggest two things if you are starting up. One is you need to keep, or rather, this is particularly, I'm not sure about the German culture, but particularly from the Indian culture, we just don't love failures. We hate failures. So we don't talk about failures. We don't assume that the startups can fail. We don't assume the business can fail. Whenever you are starting up, start from the point where, while being the most optimistic side, the startup can grow big. It can become $1 billion startup. It will become a unicorn. You will become Bezos or maybe Musk. But you must also think about, what if it fails? What if it fails? How would I live with it? Would it make any difference? Would I see it as a positive, or it would be as a negative? That is a must whenever we are starting up. And second is, absolutely start loving numbers, which Eric was also saying. So it's a great learning and a great message for everyone. Start loving your numbers, convince yourself on your numbers, and then you start pitching the idea to anyone else.
Wonderful. And some final words from Saga?
Sure. So I'll just focus on one thing, especially for the young startups out there. Is that when you're starting out, it's not necessary that you will know each and everything about every department. So it's very important to have your co-founders who are quite contrary to your features, so that they can contradict you and help you all close all the loopholes that are there in your product, and also of course help you with different things. So while it is very tempting to start startups with your friends and families, try to have people with various opinions and various viewpoints, so that you create a strong base right at the start, and then you can go anywhere from that there.
Wonderful. So we need a diverse team, of course, to succeed and not be afraid of failures. Wonderful last words. I thank you so much, Eric, Rahul, and Saga, for joining. It's been great fun for me. I thank also everyone of the participants for joining. Now we have to move over to see the pitches, the last pitches of the final 15 finalists of the Falling Worlds Lab. I'd like to thank the German Center for Research and Innovation so much for having me. Apoorv, who is there to support us from their side. So over and out from my side, you please take care, stay healthy. It's been great fun, and hope to see you very soon and stay in contact.